Okay, welcome APHPT, and thanks for joining us for this little recorded session with Dr. Todd Davenport. So, tell you a little bit about this session real fast. I heard Todd give this kind of presentation speech at the Graham sessions out in San Diego this year, and it was just so perfect. I felt like I wanted to capture it and make sure that we were all sort of benefiting from hearing it. There were a few of us in the room. We were lucky enough to hear it. But I just thought this would be really, really good information for anybody who's on the health-facing front and anybody who's trying to really be in this space. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Todd.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to Mike and thanks to APHPT for having me record this. I gave this talk at Graham Sessions in January. Any conference that bills itself as a exclusive retreat for the brightest minds in physical therapy is not sort of normally my deal. So I'm much happier talking to my computer than talking to some of the luminaries that in the audience. But I'm really excited about this idea about getting it out to people who potentially could use this idea, transform it, make it useful. And so I hope you enjoy it. So I do want to acknowledge the private practice section who had me give this talk in January and kind of form the basis for being able to give it to you. So our vision as a profession, as you know, is transforming society by optimizing movement to improve the human experience. And if you don't know anything about me, you would know. If you know anything about me, that you would know that I went back and got my master's degree in public health. Like pretty much the second I heard that, I was freaked out. I had no idea what that meant. And so I needed to ascribe some kind of meaning to it. And so kind of launched a academic and clinical midlife crisis, which sort of allowed me to sort of stumble around in the weeds until I found you guys. So thank you for everything that you're doing with APHPT and everything that you're doing to move our profession forward. So I do want to talk about this business of transforming society and how physical therapists can actually become societal change agents that are consistent with the APTA vision statement. In order to do that, I'm going to talk about the social determinants of health. So I do believe that the social determinants of health are the future of the physical therapy profession, and that these social determinants of health could be our public's cool drink of water on a hot summer day, and how ignoring them could make us physical therapists all wet. So social determinants of health is really such a clunky term. It's long, it's pseudo-technical. What's worse, it's become a buzzword. And so every fiber of my Gen X being says that this is no longer cool. And it is not to be trusted. So it's more than just a jargony sounding phrase. It's now everywhere, and it runs the risk of losing pretty much all meaning. And so, before the term loses all meaning, I want to define it for you. So the social determinants of health are factors about you that predict your health and your access to health care. They're your race, gender, sex, sexual orientation, occupation, education, wealth, your built environment, and your geography. So in other words, it's as simple as your health depending on who you are, where you live, what you do, who you're attracted to and partner with. And it really means being healthy where you live, work, play, learn, and worship. So I won't go into a ton of details here, but I'll provide a cheap plug for my 2-hour webinar on the APTA Learning Center that I recorded last fall. And if you have questions about it, feel free to tweet me. I'm at Sun's Opening Band. It is the worst handle. It is way too long, and it is an esoteric reference to a Pearl Jam lyric. So I will leave you with that. So thinking about social determinants of health will require us to make some choices about how we focus our efforts as a profession in the face of limited resources. So with all due respect to our PT thinkers who are doing really important work to push the frontiers of personalized medicine, I think we need to acknowledge that genetics only predicts about 1/3 of your risk for premature death. By the time these rare and costly genetic-based treatments are needed for non-communicable diseases that are easily preventable, I'd argue it's too late. And what about medical care? And medical care really is the reason that we're here. Our profession has been a medical-facing profession for a number of years, even back to our first roots with restoration nurses in World War I. And with all due respect to our PT thinkers who are working to improve what we do as PTs, to reduce practice variation that's unwarranted, to get us all to practice the evidence, translate the evidence to get better outcomes. Medical care is the costliest and most downstream way to improve health. And it really only chips in 10% of the variance in premature deaths. So what about the rest of it? What about the other 60% of variance in premature deaths? Well, it's all about the social environment. It's all about individual behaviors. And I believe those are our greatest opportunities as a profession. After all, if your risk of dying is so strongly predicted by your zip code, How will any of these costly interventions benefit you if they can't even get to you? And conversely, you can't even get to them. How can we prevent you from needing novel, expensive, and rare interventions to begin with? Think of what we could spend that money on as a society, and think about how physical therapy could be in a leadership role. We're not going to treat our way out of the relatively poor health outcomes that we have here in the US. We have to work to make our society healthier, zip code by zip code, town by town, and household by household. And I believe that we physical therapists should lead the way. I believe that we as a profession should focus less on our DNA and a lot more on our ZNA. Social determinants of health are like water. Water's everywhere. It runs through and around things. It dissolves materials. It's the water in your jacket from the snow that melted. It's the mudslide that carried away your house. And it's the lazy stream that you tube down on a hot summer day. It shapes, it contours, and it scars. You think you're enjoying the company of a babbling brook because as you look at it, the clear surface slides so pleasantly along the creek bed. But if you come back in several hundred years, you can appreciate the force of that small stream to carve the channel of a river. If you come back 1,000,000 or 2 years later, you may be staring into the Grand Canyon. The social determinants of health are similarly ubiquitous and similarly powerful. They can act quickly and catastrophically like mudslides. They can act slowly and insidiously like a stream carving a canyon. Like the snow melt in your coat, they can annoy. And they can be as blissful as the stream on a hot summer day. But you know, the thing with social determinants of health is that they can be all of these things at the same time. And it only depends on who and where you are. So a lot of people ask me about a business model for addressing social determinants of health. You know, what gets paid for gets done. And I think that's a fair critique. And I'll be honest, and knowing full well who my audience is, you know, lots of really bright, socially minded entrepreneurs, I'm skeptical that private business alone by itself is the answer. You know, businesses are great at targeting slices of the population for specific services. So in return, they aggregate wealth in the form of credits and payments that they distribute to employees and to owners and to shareholders. But a social justice orientation to health would suggest that health is majoritarian. Everybody should pay what they can equitably, and everyone benefits equitably. And all we have to do is to agree that removing social barriers to the basic human right to pursue one's own health is the right thing to do. And then to make our actions, policies, and behaviors as healthcare practitioners line up with our beliefs. I believe a social justice orientation of the physical therapy profession would fundamentally transform the way we think about providing care. It will make us think critically about how well and how fairly care is delivered, to whom, when, and how much. As excited as I am about science and translating the science into clinical practice, science can only inform us what and how to do, but it's really limited to inform us when and why to do it. Those are questions that have more to do with how we see ourselves, how we see our profession, and how we see our public through an ethical lens. And they have everything to do with our potential as societal change agents. But, you know, all that squishy social justice stuff doesn't always pay the bills. So I always entertain the idea I'm wrong. And even after everything I said, I hold great hope that private physical therapy businesses can prove me wrong. You know, social justice orientation to our entrepreneurship could help us realize our vision to transform society. But I look at all physical therapy entrepreneurs as social entrepreneurs. And I believe the professional vision statement requires us to refocus on the social part. So to get the ball rolling, and at the risk of excessively commoditizing the pursuit of health, which again, the UN has designated as a human right, I'd like to provide some ideas about how physical therapy businesses can engage the social determinants of health. I've used these principles to set up several programs through my university for various at-risk segments of our local population. And I've seen incredible work at other educational institutions and through private physical therapy businesses using a lot of the same principles. And I think they can work for you too. So the first is to know yourself. The easiest way to start engaging social determinants of health is to start with your own shop. Look around your clinic. Actively identify needs for difficult improvements. Start with language competency, health education, implicit bias, and then work on this stuff. Contract with an Uber driver for people with limited transportation. Contract with a child care provider for people with limited social capital. Engage in telemedicine for people with limited time. Design yoga in the park, in the crummiest park in town. Displace the folks you'd rather not see there through activities and people that you would. And then find out why the people who you'd rather not be there are there to begin with and help be that change. So you can also identify what special knowledge and skills you leverage to address social determinants of health in the broader world, even from your own shop. Know your community. So my experience is that physical therapists often know their patients, that business owners know their target demographics and markets, but no one really knows their communities, even if they live there. Ask yourself what the community needs to be healthier, and then challenge yourself to lower the barriers that exist to obtaining it. There are plenty of publicly available resources in terms of data to be able to help you out. A friendly call to your local public health office or your local hospital's planning committee could lead you to learn your community's biggest needs. And they may be very different than what you thought they were as a clinician, as a business person, and as a resident of your town. Here's the hardest part. I can't give you a cookbook. Your community and my community may have some of the same health outcomes, but there may be unique social, political, and regulatory barriers to fix them. Keep it simple. As courageous as entrepreneurs are, there are very few jumps off cliffs that turned into successful businesses. Entrepreneurship is really the hard work of making commodities out of small changes and simple ideas. Similarly, choose one simple thing that will help your community be better, your community be healthier, to find that one domino you can push down that will make the rest of the dominoes fall over. Don't overthink it. The details will complicate themselves, and always keep safety in mind. But I also think we have to pump the brakes on evaluating and screening people so much. That work in physical therapy has yet to yield scientific validity to most tests. Your goal is to engage and empower populations with this work, not just find a more creative way to make more patients in order to treat them. Avoid giving people a diagnostic label or a reason to think they're sick. So while I do agree that a lot of sort of safety issues can be avoided by getting vital signs and taking some basic biometric measurements, you don't need a lot of biometric data to help people move a little more, to eat a little less, to eat more plants, to stress less, and to form and maintain healthful relationships. Add by subtracting. Find out how you can reduce the frequency of a health problem. That's your value proposition as a physical therapist in the public health or the population health space. Find out how you can lower the costs associated with upstream care. Find out how you can raise revenues from reducing presenteeism and absenteeism. Unlike most physical therapists are how they're paid to practice, you won't succeed in population health by adding more, by adding costs, by adding charges. The money you make most likely will represent someone else's cost savings. Go to where the money is. This is the Willie Sutton principle of public health. Every person on this planet has a person or an organization that has a vested interest in keeping them healthy. And these people and organizations can be good resources for contracts and grants. For example, schools depend on student attendance and test scores for funding. Public health agencies and forward-thinking hospitals depend on not being inundated with people who have preventable problems, so they can treat people who have emergencies. Employers need employees to be at work and to be productive at work. Churches may prepare us for the ever after, but in the meantime, they need healthy parishioners in order to fill important church roles and to fill collection plates. Even third-party insurance companies can get into the act. Nonprofit insurers, like other organizations, have to distribute part of their funds for the community benefit in order to maintain their tax status. So look for these community benefit opportunities to improve the health of your community. It might just change your relationship with an insurer. The money's there. You may need to realign your own actions with the incentives that are implied by these new resources. So before I go, I want to thank you for your attention. I appreciate it very much. And to thank the organizers of the Graham sessions, and thanks to Mike for helping to navigate the technological hoops to be able to share this. And to leave you with a parting thought. If you constantly try to argue your worth, people will dispute that you have value. If you try to make yourself obsolete, you will make yourself indispensable. I think if physical therapists work to make themselves obsolete, to keep people healthy by lowering social barriers to health, to engage and empower our communities, we will show our transformative power to society and we'll realize our professional vision. Thanks.
Awesome job. Awesome. All right, man. Thank you. I'm going to hit the stop broadcast button.
Awesome. And thanks again, Mike. And thanks APHPT for all the work that you're doing. I look forward to interacting with you a little bit more on our Facebook workplace site.